I call to order the Monday, April 22nd, 2019 City Commission meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, has the roll been taken?
It has. We are missing Commissioner Kulik tonight, and did I just hear Commissioner Tolis is running a couple minutes late?
Yes. Okay. Tonight we have a few proclamations and presentations. Our first being a proclamation recognizing the Greeks clean the streets. I guess I'll first read the proclamation and then we can take a picture. Whereas the Greeks Clean the Streets program began through a partnership comprised of the fraternities and sororities at Central Michigan University and the city of Mount Pleasant. And whereas the partnership was formed in an effort to open communication between the city and the Greek community to develop a good working relationship and to incent ownership and pride in the neighborhoods north of CMU's campus. And whereas the Greeks Clean the Streets program consists of fraternity and sorority volunteers picking up trash in neighborhoods north of CMU's campus on select weekends. And whereas this year marks the 7th consecutive year for the program, and whereas since inception in 2012, close to 760 students have volunteered their time during 30 events to beautify and better the residential student neighborhoods by removing over 475 bags of trash. And whereas the effort put forth by our local fraternities and sororities has a positive impact on the neighborhoods and is greatly appreciated. Now therefore, I, William Joseph, Mayor of the City of Mount Pleasant, Michigan, on behalf of the City Commission and the citizens of Mount Pleasant, express our sincere appreciation for Greeks Clean the Streets and recognize its members for their contribution to keeping our community a better and cleaner place to live. In witness whereof, I hereunto set my hand and the great seal of the City of Mount Pleasant, Michigan, this 22nd day of April, 2019. Congratulations. Next, we have a presentation recognizing the Mount Pleasant Citizens Academy. Jacob.
Mr. Mayor, members of the Commission, Jacob Kane, City Planner. Happy to be here tonight to recognize the participants in the city's 4th Annual Citizens Academy. We had 22 folks participate this year. It was a great group, very representative of our community. As is typical of folks in our community, the group's also very involved in a variety of things. So we have a few folks who aren't here tonight because of other commitments. As far as I know, none of them are just out enjoying this beautiful night, and I'm sure they would love to be here. We do have our next academy scheduled to begin in February 2020. So if anyone is interested in participating, they can call City Hall, ask for me in the planning office, and we'd be happy to put you on the list for notification for next year. So I'm going to read off the names of the participants. I ask you participants if you'd come forward. Mr. Mayor, if you would hand out the certificates. We also have a history book about the city of Mount Pleasant for each of you to take home. These are in alphabetical order starting here. And please stay up the front, and we'll get a photograph of the group when we're done handing these out. So Joshua Adams, Melanie Duke, Maureen Ecke, Jarrell Irves, Joe Fleming, Eric Fredendahl, Gregory Hanley, Yanni Havales, Erica Hopcraft, Azharul Islam, Blaine Long, Jim McBride, Matt Mertz, Brian Mitchell, Amy Moats, Christy Onstadt, Darcy Orlick, Commissioner Amy Perschbacher, Alan Riggs, Martha Riggs, George Ronan, and Melinda Stacer. So thank you to our participants this year. It was a great group, and I know the staff really enjoyed working with you, and we hope you enjoyed the program as well.
Yanni, you'll love that book. It's really cool. Congratulations, Jim.
You guys are going to have to squeeze together a lot more. Two rows, yeah.
Put the women down.
Yeah.
We've
Not
always,
be me.
yeah, we always get stuck there, don't we?
Yeah, I wouldn't get back up again if I had to get down.
I'm going to do a quick introduction before Aaron starts.
Okay. We now have a presentation on the CMU Smart Zone conceptual plan by CMURC President Aaron Strang. And Manager Ridley, would you like to introduce?
Yes, just real briefly, as you know, the city has a contract with both the CMU Research Corporation and Middle Michigan Development Corporation to assist with the development of the Smart Zone, which is the 300 acres south of CMU's campus. And the CMURC President, Aaron Strang, is with us tonight to give an update on a project that you approved last year, which was to hire a consultant to look at the future use of that land. And so Aaron's going to walk you through that, and we have copies of the presentation in case you want to take notes on it. Aaron, go ahead.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for your time, and thank you for your continued support of the development of the Smart Zone. As Nancy mentioned, I am the president of CMU Research Corporation. I would like, since we have some new commissioners, to give you a little bit of background on CMURC, but I'm going to zip through it as fast as I can. But this will give you a little context of why we are involved in this development. So CMURC is here to help in entrepreneurial development, to help businesses grow as it relates. We leverage the university, the Mount Pleasant Smart Zone, our local and regional partners. But more specifically, we're here to help entrepreneurial development. We are a nonprofit organization. We have a board of directors. As our bylaws state, the president of the university is the chair of the board, and the remainder of our board members are a mix of university and public and private sector individuals. We are across the Great Lakes Bay region, and so we've got space in Mount Pleasant, which is our headquarters, but we also have space in Uptown Bay City and in Riverfront Saginaw. We have our entrepreneurial co-working space. Some refer to this as incubator space, in which we develop companies to grow within the areas in which we serve. And we have an accelerator program specific to bringing different individuals or different ideas to the marketplace. So high-tech, high-growth companies is what we focus on. We have a 3-phase program that's designed to get them from idea to first sale, and we're now currently moving into the next phase of our programs, which bring them into sales and distribution of their products. We have proven results through the programs that we deliver, and we record on jobs created, companies created, and capital formed on behalf of companies to the Michigan Economic Development Corporation on a monthly basis. The map that is in front of you shows the service area, so you can see we are in the yellow area. We are number 7. The creation of smart zones were developed roughly in 1999, and the idea, and which I'm in front of you talking about, was the concept to harness the intellectual talent of the university and the students and all of the energy associated with, and to really create sense of place. So in the map above, you'll see 20 different smart zones that are throughout the state of Michigan, and again, we report to multiple different stakeholders, including the state of Michigan. What I'm here today talking about is very specifically the smart zone, which we refer to and which was formed in a partnership with the university, the city of Mount Pleasant, and the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, and that was all facilitated by the Middle Michigan Development Corporation. That smart zone designation was approved in 1999, which allowed for the creation of the Local Development Finance Authority and a business accelerator, which is today CMURC. The jurisdiction of the land itself is 300 acres that is ready for commercial development. It is university land that's on the south end of campus. As you can see from the map above, the bottom road is Deerfield. The road to the west is Crawford, and then you can see West Campus Drive there, and just north of the geography in the map above is the Kelly Short Stadium and the ballpark as well. So just to give you the area that we're referring to. Again, this is located on the south end of campus. It is university land, and it is for commercial development. Prior to 2015, in which the initial smart zone was developed, there was little development, and so in 2015, it was added on to a CMURC charge to help develop this land and take a look at what the opportunity was. So the real opportunity that we're looking in this space is to recruit and retain students, to create a sense of place, ultimately to increase the city of Mount Pleasant tax base. We are looking for development that is good for business, good for the community, and good for the city and the university. As such, and as little development was done to date, we took a look at the land and we put out an RFP, and we went forward with the hiring of Gibbs Planning, and thank you to the support of the City Commission, we were able to move forward with that planning. They were chosen from a group of from urban planners. We specifically looked at their experience in university communities. They'd had a lot of work in communities that had both additional things beyond, but we were looking specifically that those that had university experience. So the project started in July 28th, in which we had kickoff meetings, there were different presentations, and ultimately the final presentation wrapped up on November 12th. I'm going to attempt to summarize the proposal that was done by Gibbs Planning Group, but I will also tell you that the final presentation, there is a video that we taped so you can have a full presentation of that from the mouth of the developer themselves, or the urban planner, as this is not my expertise, but I'm going to give it an attempt to articulate to you all the results of that. So the Mount Pleasant Smart Zone was really designed to attract and stimulate high-tech businesses. As I talked a little bit of the overview of CMURC, we are here to help promote high-tech, high-growth jobs. We're here for job creation. And so first and foremost, that was a point that we needed to focus on. The reality of suburban-type parks and tech parks is that beyond what was currently, or the history of developing of these parks, the trends have changed substantially since the initial plan that was put forth in the 80s. So the master plan overview, the proposed 300-acre Smart Zone conceptual design plan that Gibbs presented was a vision of mixed-use, walkable, and innovative neighborhoods to promote collaboration between the university, industry, research, and the community. The picture that I have shown shows 3 different neighborhoods that were identified as the circles show the geography of that space. But in a 300-acre area, it's a very large plot of land that has an available opportunity. So they really segmented it out into 3 different potential opportunities. One of the pieces that was taken into consideration is called a walk score. And so this is something that corporations look at when they're looking at areas to locate. The current walk score of the SMART zone is a 52. Companies and corporations, as multiple studies have shown, look at communities and areas to locate with a walk score of 80 or above. So a walk score of 52 would immediately preclude the property of being reviewed as a potential for development. And so as you look at different reports and things showing the trends moving away from office parks and into more of mixed-use centers. This slide is just to show a link to a core values report that was also identified, looking for, companies are looking for areas and opportunities to recruit talent. And that is one of the largest challenges that communities and businesses have, is being able to recruit and retain talent. So they're looking at how they do that, and a walk score is one of those components that they review. They not only review a walk score, but they also review a transit score and a bike score. And again, I'm not going to read the slide, but tech giants, startups, Fortune 500 firms are looking for these opportunities. So for the first time, corporations are looking at going to where the talent is instead of locating in an area and having the talent come to them. We considered existing plans. You'll see the City of Mount Pleasant zoning map that was taken into consideration. The map on the top left is the university master plan that considered some optional roads and things associated with the development that was currently happening within the university. And then the bottom left map shows the initial parcels that were laid out as potential development opportunities. The current occupancy of this land, there is Advanced Manufacturing of American Mitsubishi Corporation, there's Finance, Isabella Bank and Trust, and then E-Tax Solutions, Hospitality, Life Sciences, and Technology. So we already have some companies that are already existing in the SMART zone that we would like to build upon. With the Mixed Use Research Center is really the focus of the development of the land. So even though other alternatives and ancillary companies are identified as potential in this area, it was really the mixed use component that's a little bit different than the initial conception put in place of high-tech park that would just be company after company without other things associated. But in order to have a higher walk score and to recruit additional companies, that is why this proposal was put in place. Their proposal calls for corner stores, neighborhood shops, neighborhood centers, village centers, neighborhood greens. So it calls for a number of different things to really create that sense of place on the south end of campus. The resources that were analyzed in addition to this study were a housing study put forth by MCOG looking at what our area currently had and what we could support. Also, Gibbs Planning did an additional retail study that is available for reference as well. And as you can see from the link that I have on this presentation and that we can send out electronically, there is a 45-minute video done by the professionals that you can reference if you would prefer. In the retail analysis, they took a 10-mile radius and a 20-mile radius. They analyzed the population, the household income, and population and annual growth. They identified that there's an opportunity for additional retail, and they've identified there's an additional opportunity for specialty restaurants. Here I'm just pointing to the target analysis that I was referring to done by MCOG. That was the Isabella County study done in 2016, and that is available as well. So in short, we're focusing on tech companies. We currently, as CMURC, exist with our co-working space. Some of our anchor tenants are our private residents. We set aside 50% of the rent that they pay us, in which we will allocate to their development in the SMART zone if they choose to locate there. So we are very focused on recruiting tech companies and incubating tech companies out into that space. But we've also identified that there's a great opportunity through this study and through the primary research that we have conducted for corporate satellite offices. companies that are looking to be in close proximity to the university to utilize the talent as they have challenges recruiting and retaining talent. So looking to recruit corporate satellite offices for the space, looking for specialty retail and housing. Next steps, so just from a high level, for development to happen in this space, the CMU Board of Trustees would have to approve the project, and they would have to agree to a land lease and the terms of that land lease. The Mount Pleasant City Commission are key stakeholders, and so it was important that you all were aware of the development and the process in which we were moving forward with. So currently where we are today is we're looking to find developers that are interested in developing in this space. But again, the project approval, the initial conception would need to be approved, the concept would need to be approved by the City Commissioner and the CMU VP of Finance. As the process moves forward, a site plan would need the review of the city planner and CMU facilities, and the land lease would have to formally be approved by the CMU Board of Trustees. So even though this is a conceptual design plan that is put in front of you, there are multiple pieces and opportunities in which the city and the university have to weigh in on the potential development for the space itself. And that, from a high level, is the presentation that I have for you today. Am I able to take questions, or is that?
Yeah, thank you, Erin. Does anybody have questions for Ms. Strang? I guess you're off the hook.
Thank you.
Our next presentation is a quarterly update from Jim McBride of Middle Michigan Development Corporation.
And as Mr. McBride's coming forward, I would mention he gave us 2 documents that are on the dais for you tonight. This pamphlet, which I'm sure he's going to reference, and then this 1-page document about some quarterly statistics. Also in your packet is the annual report that MMDC provides on the industrial facilities tax abatements to show which ones are still out there and the type of investment and jobs that are created. So after Mr. McBride is done with his presentation, I'm sure he would take questions on any of those 3.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor. And also, would you want me to include the IFT as part of this presentation right now?
Just if they have questions on it.
Okay, great. Well, the first thing I'd like to point you to, I'm just going to highlight a few of the key things in our annual report. I'd like to first have you take a look at this little orange box on the inside front page there, because this shows the total amount invested by the companies we work with. This was in 2018, over $34 million, over $469,000 in grants received by the companies, 299 new hires, 157 company visits, and 302 company assets. Now, assists. Now, before I go further, I would like to have you take a look at this sheet, because this would look at first quarter of 2019. So far this quarter, for the first 3 months of the year, we've had 31 company visits. The total number in the city are 9, so that's 29% of the total. New hires reported, 40 overall. Now 40, when I say the overall is 2 counties, so that's all of Isabella County, all of Clare County. And then total for the city of Mount Pleasant, 28, 70%. Now that's particularly high for the first quarter. That'll even out as we go through the year, and typically we're somewhere in the 30 to 40% range at the end of the year. It would be more likely. Net new investments over $2 million, which so far this year, very strong start with the number of companies making major purchases. Total for the city of Mount Pleasant, $401,000, so that's 20% of the total. Company assists at 51 or 15 in the city of Mount Pleasant for 29%. So this is what you folks have wanted, the breakdown quarter by quarter, what we're looking at within the city. Back to this document, just a couple other highlights I'd like to point out. If you page over here, now we do use this annual report also as a site selection tool, as a general brochure. So if we run into a site selector that's unfamiliar with our area, We've got a couple pages here that none of this information is new to you folks, you know, about Central Michigan University and Mid-Michigan College and all the wonderful amenities we have in the area. So you would know all of this, but for somebody that is unfamiliar with our area, that's why we include these 2 pages. And this was a request. We had site selectors ask for, hey, we want to know a little more about the area. So that's why we included these 2 pages. Page over, and probably the thing that was one of the most significant accomplishments, I think, in 2018 was the American Mitsubishi expansion. You know, if we were able to land a company here that was promising 45 new jobs, I think all of us would say that's a great thing and a great, opportunity for our area. But just as important is if a company that's already here is going to expand and take on some new lines, that's just as big a deal, I think, if not in some cases more so, because that company has a history here. That company's been here for a long time, and they're not likely to leave. American Mitsubishi was never talking about leaving, but they do have another factory down in Bardstown, Kentucky. So whether that new line was going to go here or go down there, it really came down to some number crunching, and it was going to be less expensive there because they didn't have to modify the building in Bardstown, Kentucky. They could put the new press in and reconfigure the floor without any real major cost of construction. Whereas here, there's a significant cost of construction. So we were able to get the MEDC to step up after the city took the step to approve the tax abatement that you did last year. So that was the first step. Then I went down and worked with the MEDC, and we were able to get the MEDC to come up with $360,000. Now that's actually more than they normally do. Normally on a deal like this, they'd be doing about $5,000 a job. This is $8,000 a job, and so this is about the highest you ever see in terms of the dollars per job in a check that goes to the company. Now the company will have to earn this out. They'll get this in installments as they hire on these new people. So that's key. So, if they don't do it, they're not going to get the money. And of course, you folks have the opportunity to rescind, any of these abatements at any time if you're not happy with the performance of the company. So, no question in my mind this is happening. So what it is that they're doing, just so you, if you don't know, they've been over the years doing a lot of work with Honda and other Japanese companies. They make the electric motors that go into your windshield wipers and your windows and your pumps and so on. They make these electric motors. Well, Brose, which also produces those types of motors for BMW and Ford, they've come to American Mitsubishi and they want them to make the same motor. So it's a brand new line, brand new companies. So we're going to be seeing that company provide parts for BMW and Ford going forward. Okay. This is a little primer for companies that, the process, going through the process of how you pursue an abatement. And we haven't just done abatements here. We did 2 of them last year, actually 3 with Broomfield Township. So we're doing them in other parts of the county as well. $2.6 million in the Marshall Plan grants, so that impacts on Gratiot Isabella as well as Claire Gladwin. These grants went to the school districts, but I was intimately involved in both of those. I was on the board for the Gratiot Isabella one, and I was the convener for Claire Gladwin. In all cases, we're going to have these new career counselors in the schools talking with students about career planning. So right now, school counselors, and I'm sure Kathy knows this, school counselors, it's about 750 to 1 students to each counselor. It's ridiculous. The counselor never has time to see all the students on the stuff that they're responsible for, let alone ever talk to them about career counseling. So we're going to have dedicated career counselors that have already been hired in Gratiot Isabella and Claire Gladwin. But if you read this, it's really a new focus, and there's money that's going into the schools to really help with career planning for these students. And in the case of Claire Gladwin, they're going to get a certificate for auto mechanics and diesel mechanics as they graduate from high school. It's significant. So we're really happy about this $2.6 million coming into the area. A couple more things. We did receive from the state of Michigan $100,000 grant to cover our 2 counties and 3 others with the Michigan Defense Center grant. We've hired Brian Roberts. Some of you have met Brian. And he's going out there and talking to our existing companies that might be interested in pursuing defense and homeland security contracts. And there is a lot of interest. It is a little tough, you know, and it's really hard the first time you go through, but it gets easier as the Defense Department and Homeland Security, as they get to know you. So we're trying to get more of these companies involved. A couple more things. We had, on page 14, Going Pro, we had 2 of our companies in Mount Pleasant, Isabella Bank and J. Rank Electric, received Going Pro awards to train their workers. I'm going to skip over some of these other ones here that are outside of the city. And just mention that, well, we do mention on page 16, 410 West Broadway, which we still are working on with all of you and hoping to hear back soon from Americana. But I want to touch on this. This is not in the city, it's not even in the county, but it affects all of us because we came out with that US 127 study with Greater Gratiot because we, you know, among all the things that Aaron told you a little bit earlier, the thing that, you know, that site selectors and companies are looking at in terms of checking the boxes, one box we also cannot check is that we don't have limited access expressway all the way south. We've got that 16-mile stretch between Ithaca and St. John's that we're asking MDOT to put on the 5-year plan. It was on no plan, and then last year we were able to get MDOT to put it on the long-term plan, and now we're working with the Whitmer administration, trying to push that up to the 5-year plan. But one of the things we pointed out was Bagley Road. There were 5 fatalities, or 3 fatalities in 1 month in January of this year at the Bagley Road exit, right south of Ithaca there. And as a result of our study and those 3 fatalities, they finally closed off that exit. So if you've driven north, you've seen where that's all closed now. So that's a good thing. And finally, we've got our sponsors, our clients, and our board in the back. So just wanted to give you that overview. And then the IFT, I don't need to comment on that. That's, I think, pretty self-explanatory. Or if there are any questions on the IFT report.
Thanks, Jim. And do we have any questions for Jim?
Okay. Well, thank you so much, and we really, both Aaron and I really appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have our presentation on the 2020 to 2025 Capital Improvement Plan.
And this presentation will be given to you by Chris Saladin, our Assistant Finance Director, and Chris is going to give you you and the watching public, the high-level overview of the proposed capital improvement plan for the next 6 years at the city.
Thank you for the opportunity to come and talk about our upcoming capital improvement plan. The capital improvement plan is a mechanism that allows the city to maintain and improve our community's public infrastructure. These projects represent tangible improvements that our residents can see and touch. They have a direct impact on the community. The plan is a culmination of input from various stakeholders that allows us to analyze what is possible and then prioritize our expenditures to best meet the needs of our community. Tonight's presentation will mostly focus on projects for 2020. We're about to begin the process of creating the 2020 operating budget, so it's important to understand and commit to next year's projects. If there are projects that the Commission wants to see changed, added, or deleted, we would like to know about that sooner rather than later so that we can get that into the 2020 operating budget. We'll also briefly look at projects in the later years of the plan. So there are a number of changes to the proposed capital improvement plan we'll be discussing this evening. The first change is that the plan now covers 6 years instead of 5 years. This was one of the requirements from the redevelopment ready community certification process. The next change is the plan dollar threshold. During last year's City Commission work session on the CIP, we came to an agreement on raising the threshold to $20,000 from $5,000. Additionally, there's a new section in the CIP that covers both City Hall and the Public Safety Building. These projects use the building reserve that has been set aside for several years. Right now, the proposed projects would pretty much use up that reserve by the end of 6 years. But after these projects are completed, there should be sufficient time to build the reserve up again before there are major projects in the pipeline. Downtown, this is the first plan that reflects the changes made to the funding sources for downtown projects. They're now primarily assumed to be funded by the capital improvement millage instead of the tax capture funds. Some of the common characteristics of our capital improvement projects, they have a higher dollar value. They can take several years to complete. They're long-lasting assets, they have a long lifespan, and they're quite often one-off projects. And these are, excuse me, these are some of the sources that staff looks to when we come up with the proposed plan. The cash flow pages have a few purposes. They summarize everything in the plan on a few pages, so it's easy to evaluate the financial impact and timing of proposed projects to help ensure that we have adequate reserves for future projects. And I'd also like to point out to everybody that the affordability of the projects listed over the next 6 years are contingent on the state delivering on the Act 51 road funding contributions. This is important because we used to have to put CIP funds into our local street fund to cover road projects and cover all of our sidewalk projects, but now we use the Act 51 state money. Jumping into our individual projects, our 2020 medium-sized park project is irrigation and dugout repair at the Island Park ball fields. Our playground equipment is a new play structure at Sunnyside Park. Our trails and bridge decks are replacing the fishing decks at Mill Pond Park and some other various bridge decking throughout the city. And our mausoleum roof is, the roof has been repaired several times over the years, and it's at the point that we need to replace the roof to protect the roof structure underneath. For fire, our SCBAs, this is the equipment which allows firefighters to go into the hazardous environment, whether it's chemical or actually into the fire. These haven't been made for a couple years, and we're having issues getting replacement parts, so we need to get those replaced next year. This is the new building section that I mentioned. The access control project would replace the physical keyed access to our primary city buildings. This project replaces 2 obsolete separate systems at City Hall and Public Safety, and also adds access to our water, wastewater, and DPW buildings. EFIS repair, which stands for Exterior Finish Insulation System. In last year, when the public safety folks were trying to figure out why their building kept having leaks, it was identified that this was one of the primary things that needed to be repaired in order to stop water infiltration and prolong the life of the insulation system. Kitchen remodel. The public safety buildings use 24/7, and the kitchen consists of old, low-grade residential components. This project would replace those components with stainless steel cabinets, work surfaces, which should obviously last for quite a while. This project would also fix the ventilation issues that we have currently in the public safety kitchen. For downtown, as I mentioned before, this is the first year that we're primarily using capital improvement millage versus the tax capture funds. Our 2020 downtown improvement program would be accelerating the planter replacement to get better per planter pricing for the removals. Parking lot renovations, based on updated condition assessments, you'll see there were some modifications from last year's CIP. This plan has us reconstructing Lot 7 and designing the reconstructs of Lots 6 and 8. Streetscape improvement, which is adding things like benches, trash cans, etc. This would be on Michigan Street between Oak and Washington, and would be coordinated with a street reconstruction in that area. For economic development, we'd be reconstructing the alley that is parallel with Mission between Bellows and Gaylord. Industrial Park South Pond. Right now, the size of the retention pond in the industrial park limits what kind of development can happen in the park. We basically last year became aware of a grant that was specifically set aside for communities that suffered damage from the 2017 flooding events, and that would cover a good portion of this if we're successful at getting the grant. Traffic and pedestrian safety. This is our connector streets, intersection improvements, other infrastructure along Mission to improve pedestrian safety. This plan follows the design 1 year, build the next model that the city's used since 2012. And the $40,000 would be for the design of the next grid street or business connector. There are no planned overlays for major streets for 2020, and our reconstructs are Brown from North Drive to Broadway and Pickard from Bradley to Mission. For local streets, there are no overlays planned for 2020. And our reconstruct is Michigan Street between Oak and Washington, and again, that's coordinated with the streetscape project downtown. For Public Works, our Mission Creek Dam removal. The dam at the Mount Pleasant Center had the gates removed decades before the city got the property from the state. And essentially it was designed to function like a large culvert where Mission Creek just flowed through. During the flood of 2017, the water overtopped the dam and severely damaged the embankments. So this would remove the dam as well as restore the creek banks. Neighborhood lighting, this is also on Michigan Street between Oak and Washington, and again, it's coordinated with the other projects in that area. New sidewalk, this would be on Henry Street, and it would go from Broadway all the way to Pickard. Sidewalk replacement, this is our ongoing replacement program where engineering staff does condition assessments on the sidewalk and then prioritizes which sidewalks based on condition and use need to be replaced. For the airport, 2020 is more tree abatement, so basically we have to get rid of anything over a certain height so our airport is allowed to still operate at night. For our wastewater department, lift station improvements, add a generator for Oak Street as well as our normal pump replacement. 2020 should be the last year of all of our major manhole rehabs. In short, the program has rehabbed something like 1,400 manholes and saved them from having a lot more costly repairs. In the future, there will be ongoing monitoring, maintenance, and small dollar things that we'll handle through the operating budget. Meters, this is our normal meter replacement program. This is just where water meters lose the ability to accurately record flow over time. And our sewer lines, similar to the manholes, the concrete is susceptible to damage from sewer gases, so this essentially lines them. We anticipate being done with the bulk of the concrete and clay sewer lines by 2024, and like the manholes, there will be some minor ongoing maintenance after that. Plant improvements, this is rebuilding the east digester, installing a septage receiving station for septic haulers, and doing an engineering study to see what plant improvements we should do in the future. For the water department, all of the projects on the water department's list for 2020 are sort of cover like the water meters and wastewater, or they're part of our ongoing routine capital maintenance plan. And additionally, we'll be discussing, since this plan was put together, we've had some issues in the water fund, so one of the work session topics for tonight is discussing the reprioritization. This is a look at our list of recurring maintenance and improvements. Also beyond 2020, this is a list of the projects that are more one-time in nature. And also as a reminder, we have Table 7 in the back of the CIP that shows projects that were considered but not prioritized into the 6-year plan. So our next steps, this evening we have a work session. We're presenting the plan to the Planning Commission on May 2nd. We have a public hearing for May 28th. The charter requires adoption by June 11th, And then we'll be presenting the 2020 operating budget that incorporates this plan on September 9th. Tonight's work session, we're set to talk about street projects, water project reprioritization, downtown infrastructure. Our May 28th, anything that's still open from April 22nd, and any city commissioner questions.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks.
Does anybody have questions for Chris? Pete?
I got a question on the public works section on that Mission Creek dam removal.
Okay.
What's the source of funding for that?
We received a 2% grant for a portion of it, and the other portion is capital improvement funding.
Any other questions? Commissioner Lee?
I just want to make a comment. The staff has occasionally heard me complain over the years about the quality of the overhead, so I just wanted to comment that this is the best overhead presentation that we've had on this in quite a long time, so thank you very much.
Any other questions, comments? Thanks, Chris. I just want to remind the public that you can access the proposed capital improvement plan on the city's website, and we'll be having a public hearing, I believe the date is
May 28th.
May 28th. Thank you, Nancy. Moving on. I believe we are on to additions and deletions to the agenda. Are there any tonight? Seeing none, I will open the public comment section. This is for anyone to comment on any agenda items tonight. If you'd like to make a comment, just come to the podium. You have 5 minutes. State your name and your address. Anyone would like to make comment? Seeing none, I will close the public comment section. On to receipts of petitions and communications. Nancy, would you like to start us off?
Yes, we have a number of items tonight for you just to receive. The first is the report on the pending items. And I should mention that there's a note on that report that indicated that we may be suggesting a special meeting for April 29th. It's mentioned on the second page of the report, but I wanted to let you know that we will not be making that recommendation, as not all of you were available to be able to schedule a special meeting. So we will deal with that item during our regular schedule. The second item on the receipt of petitions and communications is the April 2018 minutes of the Historic District Commission, and those really are from 2018 because that group has not met since that time. The March minutes of the Planning Commission, the March minutes of the Airport Advisory Board, the first quarter investment report, as previously mentioned, the annual report provided by Middle Michigan Development Corporation on industrial facilities tax abatements. And then we've included various correspondences and a summary of the phone calls that we have received thus far on the temporary traffic control order for Preston Street parking on the south side. And then in addition, this evening you have a communication on the dais that came in over the weekend from a gentleman that lives on Preston Street. His name is John Isaacson of 1020 East Preston. And then you have 2 resignations this evening. The first is from Colleen Schoenfield from the Historic District Commission because she is moving out of the city, and also a resignation from Stephen Berkshire of the Zoning Board of Appeals, who is moving out of state, actually.
Okay. All right. Moving on to our consent calendar items. The consent calendar are the items on the agenda with an asterisk next to them. Are there any items that need to be removed from the consent calendar tonight? Seeing none, Nancy, would you like to go over the consent calendar?
Sure. The first item is the approval of the minutes of your regular meeting of April 8th. And then we have 4 bids for you this evening. The first is for grounds mowing. This is the annual bid that we do for the mowing of our boulevard areas and the edges of the West Pickard property, sometimes referred to as the Mount Pleasant Center property. You'll notice we only had 1 bid received this year, but that bidder has contracted with us in the past and has performed according to the standards of the contract. So we recommend approval of the 2019 contract as presented which includes a per-week cost of $315 per week for the various boulevard areas and $385 per week for the Pickard property. And adequate funds exist in both the street funds and the land development fund for this work. As information, next year we may look at bidding that as a multi-year contract to see if that affects the number of bidders that we might be able to interest in the project. The second bid is our annual contract for sewer relining, which Chris mentioned during his capital improvement plan presentation. The low bidder is qualified and is in situ form. Since the bid for the lines that we had planned to do this year came in so much under budget, and it's an annual project that we accomplish every year, we're recommending that we add more lines to this year's project and award the contract at a not to exceed cost of $87,400, which was the budgeted amount. The third bid is for our street sweeping disposals. We have to transport those street sweepings to an appropriate landfill each year, and Fisher Transportation is the low bidder this year. Adequate funds exist in the street fund for this contract, so we're recommending award of the bid to Fisher at a cost of $20.28 per ton. And then the last bid is for the engineering design services for the Island Park Fitness Trail and the bridge replacement. These are projects that are planned for this year to replace the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Bridge between Pickens Field and Island Park, and the construction of a half-mile of to complete the paved loop in Island Park. This project is funded by grants received, Tribal 2% funds, and capital improvement funds. As is common for some of these specialized engineering projects, we sent RFPs for design and construction engineering services to multiple firms and did a quality-based selection process wherein price is only one of the factors. We're recommending award of the contract to Rowe Professional Services at a not-to-exceed cost of $59,660. Their cost included a river hydraulic study, which they believe the DEQ may require as part of the bridge replacement project, and not all firms included that hydraulic study in their pricing. If the study is not required by DEQ, then we would not pay that cost to Rowe, and adequate funds exist for this project. The next item on the consent calendar is to approve a resolution that would authorize the mayor and clerk to sign the appropriate documents to accept a federal grant. This would be for repair work needed on the Broadway Street Bridge as a result of the flooding in 2017, but we're coordinating this project with work that also needs to be done on the Lincoln Street Bridge and also work at the riverbank at Nelson Park to obtain better pricing and efficiency. We're ready to send out the bids with MDOT in May, but MDOT requires that the contract be signed for appropriate reimbursement before those bid documents are released. The memo from City Engineer Stacy Tewari indicated that a budget amendment was also needed for this project to include the Nelson Park part of the project, because we had not received the tribal 2% funds when we originally did the budget. But now that we have those funds for that part of the project, we'd like to group them together. When I did my memo, I failed to indicate the budget amendment in my recommended motion. So we're recommending the award of the contract to Rowe and also a budget amendment for the amount of the tribal 2% funds that were received. And then we're asking you to set a public hearing tonight on a small change to the zoning ordinance. It was identified that there was a typographical error which referenced section 5E instead of 4E in the sign section of the ordinance. The Planning Commission has reviewed it and is recommending the correction. But even for matters such as this, we still have to hold a public hearing, so we're recommending you set the public hearing for May 13th. And then the last item on the consent calendar is for approval of payrolls and warrants.
Commissioner Lulon.
I call to approve the consent calendar.
Vice Mayor Gillis.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please vote by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to item number 19 is to consider a resolution authorizing an amendment to the standard lighting contract between the city and Consumers Energy for the new LED street lighting. Nancy, would you like to introduce us?
Sure. When Consumers Energy started a process last fall wherein when the large Cobra overhead street lights are needing to be replaced, they've started to replace those with LED lights. And these lights provide better lighting and they're less expensive to operate. And so far in the city, Consumers has replaced 35 of those throughout the city as part of their replacement program. And it becomes necessary on an annual basis to update the inventory in our standard contract to reflect those changes so that we're billed correctly. So we're requesting you approve the two resolutions tonight, which would allow for the deletion of 35 Cobra lights and add 35 LED lights. And secondly, since this is going to become an annual event with Consumers Energy and it's really just a paperwork update for the most part, we're recommending that you delegate authority to the city manager to approve these kind of contract amendments in the future when the only change is for the conversion from Cobra to LED. Any other streetlight changes would continue to come to you as they always have in the past.
Just a correction, it's high-pressure sodium to LED
What did I say?
from Cobra.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor Gillis.
Move to authorize the mayor and the city clerk to amend the standard lighting contract between the city and Consumers Energy.
Commissioner Lalonde.
Second.
Any discussion? Vice Mayor.
I just have a quick question on it. I occasionally have had comments from residents in some areas that they perceived a change in lighting where there was less light, and I have no idea whether that applies. It doesn't apply to any of the streets that we were talking about, but I just wondered if there's any difference in the illumination between the current lights and the new lights.
Most of the responses we've received is that the illumination is better.
As
But
I said, it may not apply to the area that.
But if there's an area that an individual has concern about, if they would contact us, we could look into that to verify that's the case.
Thank you.
Seeing no other discussion, all those in favor of the motion, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, the same. Motion passes. Item number 20 is to consider approval of the delivery vehicle permit pilot program.
Yes, we were contacted by a downtown business owner, and this business performs a significant number of deliveries of food throughout the day. And they indicated concerns with parking because the consistency of the timing of when those deliveries can be quite uncertain. So for instance, the individual may start out in a 10-hour space at the beginning of the day, make a delivery, come back, and only 3-hour spaces are available, so they'll park in a 3-hour space. But then, because of the uncertainty of when deliveries may occur, they may not have another delivery for more than 3 hours, and therefore have violated the parking restrictions and received tickets. And sometimes those deliveries are quite large, so it's not practical to always try to find a 10-hour parking space to park in. And as you can appreciate, if you've had food delivered, timeliness is often a factor too in the importance of that delivery. So the downtown business owners ask us if there would be any ability to address these challenges he has with this part of his business. And so as staff looked at it, what we're recommending is that we institute a trial program to see if it addresses the issues without creating undue parking problems in the downtown. So the trial program we're recommending for the next 6 months would make available a limited number of what we're calling delivery vehicle permits that would be available to downtown businesses. And each business would only be allowed to have one of the permits, and it would be non-transferable to other locations or to other vehicles. And there would be a cost for that permit in order to be able to have it for that business. and we're recommending that the annual cost could be at the level of $250. So for this 6-month trial period, it would be for $125. And we would limit that so that there were only 5 of these available in the downtown. So it would be available for businesses who have large numbers of deliveries on a regular basis and don't have their own parking available to them at their downtown location. So it may be applicable to other businesses other than the one that we were contacted by with this issue. So we're recommending approval of the trial program for the 6 months so that we can ascertain its effectiveness, and it will also allow us to obtain feedback from other downtown businesses or users of the downtown parking about the impacts of such a permit program.
Commissioner Ling.
I move the approval of this 6-month trial program in the Central Business District.
Commissioner Lalonde. Any discussion? Vice Mayor Gillis.
So if a delivery vehicle wants to park in a 10-hour parking space or 10-hour parking lot, they could stay overnight then? They could leave that vehicle there overnight?
I'm not as familiar with the overnight parking restrictions, and Michelle's back here. I'll let Michelle come up to answer the overnight parking restriction.
The answer would depend on which lot we were talking about, but if the delivery vehicle had an overnight permit for particular lots, theoretically it could. But I don't know of many delivery vehicles that they'd want to keep in a public parking lot overnight like that.
Okay. But they could if they had this permit?
But they could, yes.
In the 3-hour and the 10-hour?
Depending on the day of the week, only because we have what's called an even and odd system, so they would have to move it at some point in a 24-hour period. There are certain sections that are even number days that you would park, and then there are some that are odd. It gets a little confusing, but theoretically, yes, they could be overnight, but they would still have to move it every 24 hours.
Yeah, to the odd parking lot or the
Correct.
evening parking lot. Okay, thanks, Michelle. Okay. I guess my concerns with this permit is employees of downtown have this dilemma all the time where they have to go out to wherever they've parked their cars or vehicles and move, either go out for lunch and then come back in a different parking space. I'm sure realtors end up leaving their offices and coming back several times a day, just as a delivery vehicle would. So I know there are several employees that would jump at the chance of paying $125 to allow them to then leave their vehicle longer than 3 hours in the 3-hour parking lot or longer than 10 hours because of the inconvenience of having to get up from their job, their office, go out, move their car around. So I'm finding a little bit of a dilemma of a delivery truck that has so many deliveries, or at least 100, our evaluation was they had to have at least 100 deliveries per month to qualify for this permit where they can leave their delivery truck more than 3 hours in a 3-hour parking or more than 10 hours in a 10-hour parking. And it's it's counterintuitive to me because if a delivery truck is being used so much, why would there be a problem if they had to leave the delivery truck more than 3 hours? So obviously it would be because they're not using it for 3.5 hours and they want to be able to not have to worry about moving their delivery vehicle. I also have concerns what comes to mind is Pizzanelli's Pizza. They do deliveries usually by their own employee vehicle, where from what I understand, this is non-transferable, so it would only apply to the vehicle that it was assigned to. So in Pizzanella's case, they don't have a particular delivery vehicle. It's their employees that are the delivery person. They use their own vehicles and put the sign on top. So the way it's constructed, that wouldn't, Pizzanello's wouldn't be granted a delivery vehicle permit because they have different vehicles all the time using it for delivery, depending on the employee who's on staff for that day. So I know this has been a concern for many employees downtown, that they have to go out of their office, or they take their breaks and they move their car to another location. And so it doesn't make sense in my mind that a delivery truck who has so many deliveries, they're not asking for a dedicated parking space so that when they left the lot, they would be able to come back to that same parking space. They're asking us to approve that they are allowed to stay longer than any other employee is allowed to stay in that parking lot. Their service vehicle, their delivery vehicle, is allowed to stay without being moved every 3 hours, but every other employee in the downtown area, they have to leave their offices, be it bankers or other restaurant workers or realtors, they have to go out and move their vehicle. So I don't feel that conveniencing a delivery truck so that they don't have to move after 3 hours doesn't make sense to me. If they were asking for, I want to be able to have the same parking space when I come back, I could understand that. I still probably wouldn't vote for that, just because I don't think it's fair to the other employees in downtown that we make exceptions just for delivery trucks that want to stay longer in a parking spot. So I'll be voting no on this.
I would just like to clarify one thing in regard to that is we always encourage all downtown business owners and the employees to not park in the 3-hour spots. We encourage them to park in the 10-hour spots so that the 3-hour spots are available to the patrons who come downtown. And the expectation is that there's plenty of 10-hour spots. They may not be right near the business, but if you're only doing that once or twice a day, when you come to work or leave work or go to lunch, it's less inconvenient. And so we don't really want employees that work downtown to be parking in the 3-hour spots. The only reason this exception exists for the delivery vehicles is because when they come back, there's often not a convenient 10-hour spot near that food delivery business for them to be able to park in. So the 3-hour spot's their only option at that point.
I want to make one more comment. And as far as food being cold, let's say the delivery truck was parked farther from their business. It wasn't in the 3-hour lot at Jockey Alley. It was in the 10-hour. I wouldn't expect someone to take a whole catering bag of food or a delivery and walk a block and a half to the 10-hour. I would assume the owner would say, go get the delivery truck, pull it into the back of Jockey Alley, park in front of the entrance, and we'll bring out the food to you, or you can come in and get the food. So the theory that they can't get the food to a 10-hour parking spot without it getting cold, it could be managed. I'm sure the way they're doing it now, when they park in the 10-hour, is to go get your delivery truck, bring it up to the back door of your business, load in the food that has to be delivered, and then deliver it. Of course, there wouldn't make any difference at the end of the delivery because they wouldn't have any food, so there wouldn't be any food to get cold. So.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Toles.
I will not be supporting this. I think it'd be a code enforcement nightmare for one thing, and I think the $125 fee will not defray the cost of putting extra code enforcement there to enforce this.
Commissioner Ling.
I am going to support it. I think legitimate issues have been raised. I appreciated the city manager pointing out the issue on the employee parking, because that has been a real concern downtown. And for the most part, I think that that the businesses and other users have encouraged the employees not to park in the customer parking. But I think some of these other issues may, in fact, turn out to be concerns, but I think that's why it's a 6-month trial program. That's the reason I'm willing to support it. I don't know that it's going to solve the problem. If it does create problems for other businesses, I certainly hope and am confident that they will let us know that so that we can evaluate it at the end of the 6 months. But what we've been told is that there are some issues. I can understand those issues just as I can understand some of the concerns about the complications. So I don't think any potential problems are significant enough to not try it on a 6-month period and see if it solves the problem. If it doesn't or creates other problems, then we don't need to continue it. So I am going to support it.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed?
Aye.
And the motion carries 4-2. Okay. Item number 21 is consider approval of amendments to the purchasing policy.
We've had discussions in the past about potential changes to the purchasing policy, and during our work session priority discussion session, we talked about 2 changes that would have the biggest impact on efficiency, still provide appropriate controls, and potentially reduce publication costs. So we're recommending just 2 changes to the policy this evening for your consideration. The first is to change the thresholds so that quotes are required for all purchases between $5,000 and $20,000, and sealed bids are required for anything over $20,000. The second is to change the authority for purchases so that the purchase that come to the City Commission for approval would be any purchases over $20,000 instead of $10,000 as the current policy indicates. The $10,000 threshold for City Commission approval has not been changed since 2001, and if a consumer price index kind of inflation factor was applied to it, it would result in the $20,000, and that's where we came up with that number. Based on the history of the last couple years, we anticipate that that would result in you seeing somewhere between 10 and 15 less bid approvals each year that are within that $10,000 and $20,000 range. But to provide some comfort so you have an opportunity to evaluate it, what we are recommending we do is that after 1 year, we provide you a listing of each of those purchases that was in the range for that year period so that you can look at those purchases, see what they were done for, to maybe be more comfortable with your decision tonight, assuming you make this or approve this recommendation. So we're recommending approval of those 2 changes as presented.
Do I see a motion? Commissioner Lalonde?
Motion to approve.
Seconded by Commissioner Perschbacher.
Second.
Any discussion? Vice Mayor Gillis.
I don't feel comfortable with raising the limits up to $20,000. Anything over $20,000, I just think it keeps us in the loop of a lot of the purchases and a lot of the contracts that are being done. So even though I have faith in staff to provide those bids and do that, I'm going to be voting no on this. I just think it should be a lower threshold.
Commissioner Lalonde?
I'll be voting in favor of this. I think that $20,000 is a reasonable amount, and I fear getting a lot lower than that will go into micromanaging territory, and I don't think that's the role that this commission should play.
Any other discussion? All those in favor, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 4-2. Do we have any announcements on city-related issues and new business? Commissioner Ling.
I actually just have a couple of questions, but we were running a very efficient meeting, which I really appreciate, but because of that, on petitions and communications, we just went on so quickly that I wasn't able to ask a couple of quick questions that I had. One was just on the interest report, first quarter investment report, rather. on the amount of interest that we'd gotten, which was, as I read it, at least a good report, because it looked like, if I was reading it correctly, we did pretty well on the interest in comparison to what we were expecting. So I just wanted to double check that the 108, I think we've gotten about 87, and the 108 was that was the projection for the year, not just the projection for the quarter?
That was a projection for the year, but that projection was done about 18 months ago, and the interest rates have risen. So in the amended budget in September, you'll see an amendment upward for that.
Right. No, but I thought that was in general good news. You know, I always have someplace to spend it, so it's always nice to see that we're going to have that extra money. And then secondly, I just wanted to make note of the correspondence that we've gotten from Preston Street, and I just had two comments. One was, and maybe I missed it when I went by, but I had the impression that we had said when we were told when we got the original notification that was going to go in, that there would be no parking here to corner on both sides of both of the intersections, I believe. And I think, at least when I went by again yesterday, one of the intersections, I think it's the first one, whichever street that is, I should know, is it Glenwood maybe? Linwood, I think. It's on the west side, but I don't think there is one on the east side. Is that what it is? Okay. Yeah.
We will double check that to.
Okay. Because I think I know, at least from my perspective, I'm always a big believer in the no parking here to corner, because I think that's one of the things that that really makes a difference in terms of using the street. And then just secondly, obviously there is some concern about it, and some suggestions were made on information that some of the residents on the street would be interested in our having before we make the final decision. And one of the main ones was when the trial period ends in relationship to when there's heavy use of the street, because I think of the Little League and softball season, and if I was reading the notes correctly, I think they were suggesting that this was supposed to end about the end of May, beginning of June, but that season goes into maybe August, and they wondered about, and I'm not suggesting we do it one way or the other, I just want to make note of that suggestion, and that I could understand their concern since I'm on that street quite a lot. I do know that is a period of time when the parking on the streets is much more of an issue.
Yeah, you're correct. We, under the typical 90 days, we would be bringing that to you at your June 10th meeting for you to consider whether it should be made a final traffic control order or not. And some of the increased activity actually started about a week ago.
I did notice that.
And
yes.
this past weekend, you saw a lot of activity there. So we think we'll have a pretty good idea of some of that activity. But certainly one of the options you always have if you want more evaluation time is we can extend the temporary traffic control order for a period of time before making it final. So in June, based on the feedback we have and the analysis that's done, if you feel you want a longer time period, we could extend it at that time.
Thank you.
Any other announcements or new business? Vice Mayor Gillis.
Just wanted to let the public know we have 4 openings in our boards. You can find the applications at mountpleasant.org under Boards and Commissions. We have a position on the MRF, the Material Recovery Facility. We also have a position on the LDFA, the Local Development Finance Authority, which Aaron Strang was speaking of at the beginning of the meeting, Historic District Commission, and the Zoning Board of Appeals. So please, if you're interested in any of those, you can find the application. If you need any more information, there in the applications, it has some descriptions of what those boards do. And you can always reach out to any of our staff or any one of us if you would like some more information. We will be, the Appointments Committee will be hopefully meeting next week, and so we can start looking at some applications. So please, if you're interested, put in your application. I also want to remind the public that we will be having a forum on the Pickard Street Road Diet. Our wonderful reporter from the Morning Sun did a article about that road diet. The idea is to take the 4 lanes of Pickard Street from Bradley to Mission and reduce it to 3 lanes, 1 lane each way, turning lane and bike lanes on both sides of that street. So I would love to hear some feedback and your opinions on this road diet. So please put that in your calendar. That will be May 8th. That is a Wednesday, only a couple weeks away, from 5:30 to 7:30. And you can always write us, the city commission, or if you have a letter or you want to speak to someone in the city manager's office and express your concerns or opinions, that will trickle down to us. And I also want to remind the public, we have free brush pickup at the beginning of next month. Mr. Zhang, could you tell me the specifics of that? Has that already been, the sign-up has already closed?
The sign-up starts here on the first of the month.
Okay, May 1st?
In the middle of the month is when the pickup is done.
Okay, so May 1st, you can call the Public Works Department, and we take the first 150, is that correct?
Right.
Wonderful. So if you have some limbs and some brush that you would like to get rid of, the city crew would love to come through your neighborhood and pick that up for you for free. A half hour's worth of free brush pickup in the spring and the fall. We only take the first 150. So get on the phone. Thank you.
Do we have any other announcements or new business?
Mayor, I have one thing real quick.
Sure.
We heard from our master plan consultant today who indicated that the responses to our online surveys that we have on the website regarding the master plan are still coming in fairly consistently. So they have recommended, and we've agreed to extend the deadline to fill out those surveys until April 28th. The deadline was originally yesterday, but because of the consistent feedback, we're going to extend that for one more week. So I would encourage you to have your friends and neighbors fill out the survey if they haven't done so already.
I would just like to remind the public that before we meet again, we have a new class of CMU graduates who will be graduating in a couple of weeks. And I'm sure we'll be getting a lot of traffic on our streets and a lot of parents. And a good congratulations to all our graduates. And be careful on the roads. Anything else tonight before we recess?
Public comment.
That's right. We now have a public comment section. For any city-related business, you can come to the podium, state your name and your address, and you'll have 5 minutes. Anyone would like to give public comment tonight? Seeing none, I will close the public comment section. We're going to recess upstairs for a work session on the capital improvement plan.